Hey you guys, so today we're going to be learning about factoring trinomials again, except the coefficient this time is not 1. So what it means by coefficient is not 1, the number in front of the x squared, which is this 3, is not 1 this time. So we have to do a couple extra steps. So let's jump into it. So the first thing, we're going to label A, B, and C. So we do the first couple steps the same. A is 3, B is -2, and C is -8. So A is always the number in front of x squared, B is the number in front of x, and C is the number that doesn't have an x next to it or a variable next to it. And then we're going to do our little formula. So something times another number is going to equal AC, and that same number that we got above plus that same number that we got above is going to equal B. So instead of writing A times C and B, since you had that from your notes last time, I'm going to erase A times C and I'm going to multiply. Usually it was whatever number C was because A was 1. So 1 times C was just C, right? This time, A times C is 3 times -8. So 3 times -8 is -24. So I'm going to erase this and I'm going to put -24. And then your B term is -2. Okay, so we are going to look for the factors of -24. So we have 1 times 24, right? We have 2 times 12. I know I have to make one of them negative, so we're going to get to that, but just give me a minute. 3 times 8, 4 times 6. Those are the only 4 factors. We can't do anything else. So here we go. We have to find a -2. Now, if we subtract 24 minus 1, or if we add these together, that's not going to get us 2. It's not going to come close. Same thing with 2 and 12. 12 minus 2 is 10, and if you add them together, it's 14. 8 minus 3 is 5, and 3 plus 8 is 11. 4 plus 6 is 10, but 6 minus 4 is 2. So this is going to be my answer, but I need to figure out where to put the negatives. So if I did -4 plus 6, that's going to give me a +2, right? This is technically the same thing as 6 minus 4, +6 minus 4. But what if we did 4 minus 6? +4 minus 6 is -2. And also 4 times -6 is -24. So that checks out. So our two numbers are 4 and -6. And then 4 and -6. And if you have a negative and a plus, remember to erase that plus. It just makes it more confusing. You don't need the plus and a negative next to it. So 4 times -6 is -24. That checks out. 4 minus 6 is -2. That checks out, which means these are our numbers here. So here's the difference. Usually you'd write it like this. X plus 4, x minus 6, right? And you're like, cool, done, next problem. This time, though, that's not the answer, because look what happens if you do x times x. That's x squared, not 3x squared. So we have to do something different. So we're going to still use those numbers, but pay attention to these next steps. So I'm going to rewrite my problem, 3x squared. I would recommend not writing this down and just watching, then pausing and copying it down after, if you're taking notes, okay? So the 3x squared is going to stay the same. I'm going to drop that down. The -8 is going to stay the same. This is where we split up the -2. What did we turn -2 into? We turned -2 into a 4 and a -6. Now, here's the thing. I still needed to add up to -2x. So if I put +4 minus 6, well, 4 minus 6 is -2, not -2x. So I have to give both of these terms an x. Now, did I change the problem? Not at all. I just said that I changed -2 into 4x minus 6x. And 4 minus 6, or 4x minus 6x, is -2x. So I didn't change anything. I just changed the -2 into something different, but it still equals -2. Okay, then we're going to draw a line between the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. So this negative goes with the 6. So make sure to draw the line before the negative, right? It wouldn't make any sense to do this. We have 3x squared plus 4x minus. right? That doesn't make sense. So split it. The first two terms are over here and the last two terms are over here. Draw a line. Now we're going to take the GCF of the first two terms. So what do these have in common? Let's look at the numbers. Can we take anything out of 3 and 4? All we can take out of 3 of 4 is a 1. Let me give you another example. What if we had 3 and 9? So if it was 3x squared plus 9x. Do you see how we could take a 3 out of both of those numbers? So in this case, 3x squared plus 4x, we cannot take out any numbers. But do they have variables in common? So if we have an x squared and an x, both of those we can take an x out of. So I'm going to write x, parenthesis, and whatever I have left over. So the 3 and the 4 don't change. If I had an x squared and I took out an x, I have 1x left. And then if I have 4x and I took out an x, I just have a 4 left. Okay, let me show you how that works when we go backwards. So to check my answer, I would multiply really quick. X times 3x is 3x squared. Great, I got that first one. X times 4 is 4x. I got that one. Okay. Now we're going to take the GCF out of the next two numbers, out of these two. So they both don't have an x in common, so we can't take an x out, but we can take a number out. So they have a -6 and a -8. We could take a -2 out of both of them. By the way, if they both have a negative, we're going to take a negative out. Okay? So I know it's going to be a negative something. And I just said -2 because both of them go into 2, right? So if I do -6 divided by -2, I have a +3 left. Why? Because if I multiply back, -2 times 3 is -6. Okay? -8 divided by -2 is a positive, oops, and then I have to put an x, I'm sorry. Because when I multiply here, I have to get the same number. I'm not changing anything. I'm just taking out a greatest common factor. And then -8 divided by -2 is a +4. So I'm going to put a +4 here. Now let's check really quick. -2 times 3 is -6. Great. And I have an x at the end. -2 times 4 is -8. Awesome. And pretty much there's just one more step. Do these two match? They must match or you did something wrong. So that's kind of a cool thing, a key part of this. If you see that both of those don't match, you did something wrong. I'm going to take one of those and I'm going to write it out. Okay. What are my leftover pieces? Well, my leftover pieces are the x and the -2. My leftover pieces go together in a parenthesis like that. That is your final answer. If you want to check, you can always FOIL. So I'm going to do it really quick over here. And I should get this answer when I FOIL. If I don't, again, I did something wrong. But this should be a telltale sign right here. That means you did it right. It'd be really hard to get those the same and still have done it wrong. Okay, so 3x times x is 3x squared. I'm just FOILing. 3x times -2 is -6x. 4 times x is 4x. And 4 times -2 is -8. Remember, I can add the middle two terms because they both have an x. So -6x plus 4x is -2x. I'm going to bring down the -8 and the 3x squared. This is the same thing as this, which means this is my answer. All right. It's kind of a lot. So let's do it again. Remember, the first steps are the same. A, B, C, and then this. Those are the same. And this part. Those are all the same. So let's do those that we're comfortable with. So A is 6. B is 1 because there's a 1 in front of the x. It's never going to have an x inside of the B, A, B, or C. Okay? And C is -2. All right. So we're going to now a number times a number has to equal A times C. 6 times -2 is -12. That's what A times C is. Okay? B is 1. When you add them together, they should equal 1. When you multiply them, they should equal -12. Okay. I'm going to find the factors of -12. So 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. Those are my only factors. Now I have to make a -12 and a +1. Okay, this 12 minus 1 is 11. 12 plus 1 is 13. That's not going to give me a 1. 6 plus 2 is 8. 6 minus 2 is 4. That's not going to give me a 1. But what about this one? 3 plus 4 is 7. But 4 minus 3 is 1, right? So I have to do a positive one. If I was going to do a negative one, it would look like this. Right? But if I want to do a positive one, it's going to look like this. Okay, so let's try those two numbers, -3 and 4. Let's make sure they check out. -3 times 4 is a -12. That's great. -3 plus 4 is a +1. That's awesome. Okay, now what we're going to do is the new part. So the first step is to just rewrite the problem. So 6x squared plus x minus 2. The second step is to bring the first term down and bring the last term down. We're splitting this term up into whatever we found here. So -3x and a +4x. Why did I add x? Because I have to still get to an x. So let's just check. -3x plus 4x is a 1x, right? Okay. So whatever we get here, we're putting here, right there. And then tacking an x on the end of it. Okay, we're going to draw our line. Remember, always draw it right before the sign, because it tells me it's a +4x right here. So I want to draw it before that sign. And then I take the GCF out. Okay, look at the numbers first. 6 and -3. Remember, I told you to take a negative out if they're both negative. So they're both not negative, so we'll just take a positive out. So, and sometimes we still need to take a negative out, and I'll show you that later. So 6 and a -3 is, we're going to take a 3 out of those because a 3 can be divided by 6 and a 3 can be divided by a -3. Now I'm going to look at the x's. So I have x squared and x. They both have an x in common, so I'm going to take out an x. And what's left over? Well, 6 divided by 3 is 2. And then I have an x left over because I had x squared and I divided an x, so I have 1x left over. And if we multiply that, 3x times 2x is 6x squared. Okay, and if I have a -3 divided by 3, I have a -1. And then x divided by x, there's nothing left, right? I had an x and I divided out an x, so there's nothing left. Now I'm going to look here. They don't have x's in common. There's no x on the outside of -2, but they do have numbers in common, a GCF. So a 4 and a -2, I could take a 2 out of that. They both can be divided by 2. 2x minus 1. So I did 4 divided by 2, which is 2. And then I just put an x on the end because we didn't take out any x's. And then -2 divided by 2 is a -1. Let's multiply to check. 2 times 2x is 4x. 2 times -1 is -2. These two match. Awesome, because that's one of our pieces of the factored form. The next two pieces are whatever we have as leftovers, which is a 3x and a 2. Whatever our GCF pieces were, that goes in a parenthesis with each other. And that's your final answer. Again, you can FOIL to check. But like I said, if these two match, you did it right. It would be very unlikely for you to have done it wrong if those two matched. All right. We have 2 more. I just did 4 this time. Okay, 5. So we're going to do A equals 5, B is 19, and C is 12. So we know we can't do that trick, by the way, because remember, this is not 1. This is not 1. This is not 1. In our last factoring, all of those were just a 1x squared. Okay. So now we're going to a number times a number equals A times C. So 5 times 12 is 60. And another number plus a number is 19. Okay, so what multiplies to 60? We have to find the factors of 60. 1 times 60, 2 times 30, 3 times 20. If you don't know, you put your calculator. 60 divided by 2, 60 divided by 3, 60 divided by 4, 60 divided by 5, 60 divided by 6. It doesn't divide it into 7, 8, or 9. And then again, when you get to 10, you're like, okay, it's 10 times 6, 12 times 5, 15 times 4. You don't have to go past 10. So you know that's your stopping point. All right, now we're just adding this time. So because we know that both of them are positive, a positive 60 and a positive 19. So 1 plus 60 is 61. This is 32. This is 23. This one is 19. So 4 times 15 is 60, and 4 plus 15 is 19. So they both check out. Awesome. So our first step is to rewrite the equation. We're going to bring the first term down. We're going to bring the last term down. We're going to split the middle into whatever we got here and just put x's on the end. So we have a positive 4x and a positive 15x. By the way, it doesn't matter which way you write it. So let's say you wrote 15x plus 4x, you're still going to get the same answer. Okay, so you could switch those around. Okay, we're going to draw our line down the middle. And we're going to take the GCF of the first two. 5 and 4, you can't take a GCF out of that, but you can take out an x. They both have an x in common. So the 5 and the 4 are going to stay the same, and I'm just going to take away an x from each of those. So this is left with 5x plus 4. Multiply back in. X times 5x is 5x squared, and x times 4 is 4x. So we did that right. 15 and 12, they don't have an x in common, but they do have a number. So let's take out a GCF, which is 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. I'm going to keep the x there because we didn't take an x out. And 12 divided by 3 is 4. These two match. So it's 5x plus 4. And then our GCF, our leftover pieces, x plus 3. Okay, number 4, ABC. So A is 5, B is negative 18. Oops, I forgot a negative. Let's do that. Negative 18, and C is 9. So A times C is 5 times 9, which is 45. And then that same number plus that number is going to be B, which is negative 18. Okay, so we find the factors of 45. So 1 times 45, 3 times 15, 4 doesn't go in, but 5 times 9, 6, 7, and 8 don't go in. So those are our only factors. Now we have to have a positive 45. All these make a positive 45, but we have to have a negative 18. So how do we get a positive 45 and a negative 18? Well, the way to do that is to make both of them negative. So for example, negative 1 and a negative 45, a negative times a negative is a positive 45, but that's going to give you a negative 46, right? When you add them. So what about negative 3 minus 15? Well, negative times a negative is a positive, but if we have two negatives, we add them together and keep the sign. So this is going to be your answer here. So negative 3, negative 15, negative 3, negative 15. Erase the plus sign if it's plus and negative. You don't have to. It's just, I think it's more clear if you just have the negative instead of plus and negative. And then a negative 3 times negative 15 is 45. Negative 3 minus 15 is negative 18. And then the first step is to rewrite the problem. So 5x squared minus 18x plus 9. You bring the first term down, and you bring the last term down, and you split this middle term up into these two numbers. So negative 3x minus 15x. Put an x because you still want it to get back to this number, negative 18x. Then we're going to draw a line down the middle, and we're going to take the GCF out. So 5 and 3, we don't have anything in common. We can't take a number out of those, but they both have an x in common. So I'm going to keep the numbers the same and take out one x from each of them. And then I'm going to multiply back in to check. So x times 5x is 5x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. GCF for negative 15 and 9. There's no x in common, but there's a negative 3 in common. Okay, actually, let me just take out a 3. Okay, so I have, if I take out a 3, negative 15 divided by 3 is negative 5. and then an x, right? 9 divided by 3 is 3. Okay, let's check. So 3 times negative 5 is negative 15, and 3 times 3 is 9, right? Now here's the thing. Do you see how the numbers match? But the signs are opposite. If this happens, because you have a 5x minus 3 and a negative 5x plus 3, you need to take a negative out here and switch these signs. So instead of, let me zoom in. Instead of a negative, that's going to be a positive, and this is going to be a negative. Because you'll still get the same answer when you multiply back. Negative 3 times 5 is negative 15. Negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. And now these match. And you need them to match. So 5x minus 3 and x minus 3. And so if that ever happens, if these signs are just flip-flopped, but they're the same numbers, you just need to take a negative out right here, and then you can change the signs, okay? I'm going to have another Google Meet this week, so if this is confusing, come to the Google Meet, and I will definitely help you guys, okay? I miss you. I love you.